series in Deuteronomy and are like missing the fact that David's not here today, sorry to disappoint you. But if you're like most of us who probably need another week to process from the last half of the Ten Commandments, like this is a good segue to next week. So let's go ahead and jump into a time of prayer before Lynn and I discuss our time in Japan. Father God, we come before you this morning and are just so thankful for who you are and what you've done, both here and around the world. Father, I just pray as Lynn and I speak this morning that you let us convey the work that you are doing in Japan, the things that we saw, the things that we experienced, the people we met, and let this message just glorify you today. We ask these things, Father, in the name of Jesus. Amen. So I think the big question that we always have been asked in like the last several months is, why Japan? And I think as we, work here? We say, why this thing? Okay. All right, there we go. So for Lynn and I, it was kind of obvious for us, but for most people that we spoke to, whether it was in the planning stages or after, while we're there, or since we've come back, the big question has been, what's so special about Japan? Why, is Japan on your hearts? And I think really what it kind of comes back to was there was a message in February when we were still in Romans, which, I was thinking about that. Romans seems like it was like 2 years ago, but it was like just earlier this year. But we were going through Romans, and Pastor David was teaching on I think it was Romans 9 and 10. And we had this message, and I put a couple things up on the slide here of just a clip of what he had on there. And there was kind of these specific questions for the Romans with specific answers for the Romans. And then he also discussed generic kind of modern questions and then what our generic modern answers are from that. And when we left that Sunday, I think for both of us, there was like a stirring in our heart. And I don't know how it kind of, if you've ever had kind of like an emotional response or like a conviction about something coming from a church service, but there was just something a little bit different about that day. And so I'll let Lynn kind of share her memory of, any, specific moments from the back end of that service. But
I guess when I went home from that sermon, my heart was definitely stirred. And while I was listening, I was like, oh, yeah, I've wanted to be a missionary since I was like 4. I just had always wanted to. It just had never been something that, aligned with what we were doing. And I always thought, oh, where would I go? Like when I was little, I wanted to go to Africa, really, because I liked giraffes. But after that, my family ended up moving to Hawaii, and I got to know the Japanese culture a lot there. And thinking about it, I was like, yeah, if we ever went, I'd probably go to Japan because I kind of speak the language enough to get around. I know a lot about like their beliefs and their culture. And so I was like, in my mind, I was like, that's where I'd go. But, that's not Zach's heart. So that's where I'd go. But so I went home kind of like, that was kind of my takeaway. But Zach had a different response. I'll let him share.
So I think one of the key points that David brought up as he was talking about kind of walking through, election and evangelism and all of that was, he said, if election and evangelism, what if ignorance? And the answer was, be burdened by the ignorant, don't ignore them. And I think that just kind of stood out to me, and it was just like, whoa, what's going on here? And like I said, Lynn kind of had like a normal response to something like that. And in the way that I react to things is I usually have like full-on conversations in my head with someone else prepping for that actual conversation. But it was like one of those where you're like guys in the room, like you're taking your wife's car, like to, get the tires rotated, and you hit a deer that morning, and you're like, okay, I gotta, how am I gonna position, and prep this conversation, or, you're like, you're at Grain Growers and they got like a deal on a shotgun. You're like, I've kind of had my eye on that. I don't need it, but I want it. I'm gonna buy it, and then I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna go home and be like, hey, babe, remember how I saw that thing that one time? I know we're saving for this, but I bought this shotgun. So that was kind of going through my mind as we're like walking through this of like, well, missions, like that's weird. Like I've never thought about that. And I'm thinking, how do I have this conversation? So I'm thinking like, okay, let me say like, well, I'm not saying like we would do anything, but like, or like we would go anywhere, but like, what did you think about the message and like missions? And Lynn was like, oh yeah, of course. And I was like, but if we were to go somewhere, like look at something, where would we go? And she goes, Japan. And I was like, oh, duh. And when I tell that story, people are like, but why was it a duh moment, right? And so Lynn shared that like she lived in Hawaii. She's 4 years of language between high school and college, has been to Japan multiple times. What was kind of your experiences the first couple of times that you were there and what you saw?
It was I grew up in a very tiny, not this tiny, but a small town, very Dutch community. Everyone was a Christian, and everyone went to Christian schools, and there was like the Reformed Church and the Christian, and they were at odds with each other. And it was like we were kind of in our own bubble, and then my family moved to Hawaii, which is a total Asian culture, which I think we had one Asian person in where I grew up. So I had no idea when I first went. But I was a minority in my high school, learned a lot about Japanese, Korean, Chinese, other Asian cultures, and just really fell in love with that whole region. And the only languages in my high school were Japanese and Spanish, and I didn't want to take Spanish. So I took Japanese when I was like, this is cool. Didn't realize it would ever come in handy, but continued taking it in college because I liked it so much. Took a couple trips there with school groups and was just enamored by their beautiful culture. So yeah, that's kind of where my love for Japan came.
Mine starts a little different path. Grew up in Idaho, and my first duty station after joining the Marine Corps was Okinawa, which like when we say like Okinawa is Japan, it's like for us saying like Hawaii is part of the U.S. Like it's part of the country, but it's very different. And so I spent my first year in the Marine Corps technically stationed in Okinawa, but I was only there for about 7 months because I was all over the Pacific Rim area. But I've told people like the first place I ever had Japanese food was Japan. And if you know me, like every time up here I talk about food in some way, like I'm a foodie, and I was just like, man, this is the first step to my heart. Is that. And so fell in love with the Japanese food, the culture, and just like when I met Lynn, we had both been to Japan in the past separately, and it was kind of always like a bucket list thing of like, oh, we would love to go there. Never thought it would be maybe this way, but always thought like how cool of a culture it is, how amazing would it be to take our kids there, let them experience it, just because it just kind of had like a special place in our heart. And so we're excited that we're able to finally go there together. So that's kind of like a background as to like when you ask why Japan, and then like, why was it a duh moment? It's because, we both really, really love Japan. So this is the verse, or the passage that David had spoken on when he was kind of going through this, and I'll read it for you. It says, Romans 10, 13 through 15. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. As we sat over there, several months ago listening to this message and hearing that, like I said, there was just this stirring in our hearts of, not just an appreciation for the Japanese culture, but I think a response in our hearts of God saying, hey, I think there's something more about just you liking Japan. I think, we should look at it from, what is he doing there? And so as we started planning, as we started looking at where to go, and, our initial thought, I think, was, like when like the way I grew up with, in church with missions, it was, hey, we're getting some people together. We're going to go down to Mexico or Central America or Africa. We're going to be there for 10 days. We're going to help build an orphanage, get some people some fresh water, and then we're going to come home. So that was kind of my context when I thought of missions. As we started reaching out to people and saying, hey, is there some place that we could come help and serve for a week? The response was weird because everyone was basically like, no. Or it was just silence. And I remember, having a conversation with Patrick about it, and he goes, well, put yourself in their shoes. Some random person just sends you an email and says you want to go help. Like, you might, take a step back and say, who is this guy? So that definitely, like, that conversation helped. But the cool thing was, as we were looking at this, and as we have found out, there are, like, a whole bunch of organizations there who have not ignored God, and they are not ignoring the ignorant because they are there. And it was so amazing to just see how God's working through the missionaries and the mission organizations over there. I know this list is you can't even read, and that's fine. But this just to show you, this is it's called JEMA, Japanese Evangelical Mission Association. So these are groups that are part of member organizations of JEMA that are currently working in Japan. And there's obviously a ton more that are not a part of this. So this is just kind of like Protestant-based that is with this group. One of the missionaries that I had a chance to have coffee with, told me about this. He's like, hey, go check out this website. See how many people are out here, working in the field right now. And it was really cool that, the way things worked out and kind of having the conversations that we're able to have, in that, we got to see people who have already responded in the same way that, David is talking about, of not ignoring the ignorant. And they have put their lives on hold to go out and work for the Lord. So it's just really, really cool to have seen that. So what did we see? What did we experience? We were there for about 2 weeks. We traveled primarily, and we were in Tokyo, and we went over to Osaka, and then Kyoto. And that's kind of like what do they call it?
The golden route.
The golden route, because it's kind of like the big three. And when you think about it, it's like, people can live in these areas and have never gone to the other areas. Going from Tokyo to Osaka is like driving to Boise. It's like a 4-hour trip. Like for us living here, it's like, oh yeah, I'm, going for the weekend. I got a doctor's appointment, But it's interesting just to see kind of how many people have never kind of gone different ways. The first thing is we started looking at Japan and realizing, like, okay, we like Japan, we've been there, it's a cool place. I've never looked at it from like a context of like religion in Japan. And I know Lynn had some personal experiences kind of growing up in Hawaii, seeing Japanese people kind of
mix between Christian and Japanese beliefs. So one of my close friends and her family went to church with us, but also they would go to the Shinto shrines in Hawaii, and they would have lots of, you'll see in some of our pictures, the little tokens that you purchase that are like good luck or ward away evil spirits. They had a whole shrine, and it's very normal to have shrines in your house for passed away relatives with like their picture. You put food on it every couple days so that the spirit isn't angry. So it was a very kind of, for me, growing up in a very Christian area, seeing people meld them together was kind of bizarre at first. So I think the Japanese culture, They have no problem with lots and lots of different gods. And so one of the people that's talked to us, they said, Japanese people don't have a problem with Jesus being God. They have lots of gods. They just don't understand why he's like, he could be the only God, or why, the real true God could be the only God, which was something that's it's a difficult thing to broach with them, to explain why this is the only way. It's not just one of the gods. You know what I mean?
So as we, the two primary religions there are Shintoism and Buddhism, and they are actually intertwined now. When you think of Buddhism, like my original experience was with, when I was in Thailand and I, saw the Buddhist monks and everything like that. But if you go to Japan, Buddhism is a little bit different there because Shintoism kind of predates Buddhism and predates kind of more of like a unified Japan, and it's very tied into, as Lynn was saying, like ancestors, very nature. So you think of like Zen gardens and things like that. Like that's all part of Shintoism. Very focused on spirits and things like that, which are things that we experienced or we like observed that aspect of that religion. Buddhism, came to Japan in like the 6th century, somewhere around there, from China, or originally I think from Korea and China, but it was kind of moving in there. And as a new religion is coming into this culture, they are trying to figure out what to do with this. And obviously at that same time frame, you have not really a unified Japan. You have clans, and you have one clan kind of holding on to Shintoism, and you have other clans that are embracing Buddhism, and you're kind of seeing like how do these two religions meld together. And we have pictures of one of the places that we went to, but there's basically like two warlords were battling over who would be like the emperor, essentially. And the guy who supported Buddhism won, and therefore Buddhism became more of a widespread religion in Japan. But he did something very interesting. He wrote, I think they're like the 3 sutras of Japanese Buddhism, which are interesting to me for 2 reasons. A, it's the first known writings in the Japanese language, was what he wrote. And the other thing that was really interesting is he incorporated Shintoism into Buddhism. So it's like one of like the 3 legs of Buddhism in Japan. And they were completely intertwined for a long time, and now they're kind of separated, and but they're still, one of the things that we heard from folks was Japan, like 90% of people who are it's like 99% of people are, Buddhists or Shintoists, but probably about 60 or 70% of them don't even really believe it, but they just do it as part of like a just in case, which is very strange, I think from our context. And the other thing that was very interesting about the kind of like the connection with that is it's really, because it's just kind of a just in case, it's like, okay, we kind of focus on Shintoism with birth and Buddhism at death. And so they just kind of take parts of these rituals. Christianity in Japan has an interesting history. It was first brought to Japan in the 1500s by the Jesuits. And then it was banned for 200 plus years. And during that entire time, though, that 250-year period, they basically kicked anybody out of Japan that had more than one non-Japanese grandparent. So there was like mass exodus of people, lots of people ending up in Indonesia and Korea and other places. And it didn't open back up until Tom Cruise went there, and they kind of worked that out in The Last Samurai. But when you look at Japan, it is a first world nation. It is very obviously tech focused. Just everything is like the gadgets, the kitchen stuff. It's amazing. Like everything sings to you. Like everywhere has like tankless hot water. It's just like you turn it on when you need it. It's awesome. So to think of like a very like forward leaning nation to have kind of like a kind of a stiff arm up against Christianity is interesting. There's basically less than 1% of the population is Christian, and I think the most at any time was about 5%. And during that original time where they banned it, it was actually heavily persecuted, and people were they would basically put pictures of Buddha on the ground, and if you walked over it, then they would kill you. So a lot of people were like, oh, well, I'm not going to walk over it, and they kind of fell away from their faith, which is, it's interesting just to kind of see some of that context. Japan is the second most unreached people group in the world. And I kept seeing stuff about the second most, so I just had to figure out what was the first one, and it's Bangladesh. But so like I said, it's very interesting just the fact that it's such a modern nation, but as Lynn said, they have no problem with Jesus being God. But they don't really, because they have lots of gods. And one pastor was telling us they can't comprehend the word love in Japanese as it applies to a god. Because that word love in Japanese, I'll let Lynn say it because
it's like a romantic love, and so when you tell them "aishiteru," like God loves you, it's like a what? Like God is like in love with you, like romantically. But it's interesting how that concept like doesn't exist, and so reaching people and telling them about this is quite a difficult task, just culturally for them to understand.
So as we kind of move forward through this morning, we have a lot of pictures. This is just like a handful that we kind of picked out that just kind of showed us a few specific things that we wanted to kind of key in on. This is us walking into Sensoji, which is a Buddhist temple in Tokyo, and it was a super cool experience. As you can kind of see on the right-hand side, there's a lot of little flags there. It was amazing to see the commercialization of all of their religious institutions. Because a lot of foreigners are going to come as tourists and they want to buy souvenirs, but it's actually part of how they practice their religion as well. And so as we were walking in, we were just kind of amazed that everything is like you're paying for everything just to go to church, basically. And so this is kind of like the great, the big building as you're like walking in. And as we were, kind of getting closer, you start seeing a little bit of what people were doing. And so there's kind of hard to see on like the right-hand side of the image, there's like these large statues in there of like protectors for, to kind of like ward off evil spirits and things like that. This is...
Go back to that one.
Oh, yeah.
Another interesting thing about the protector is someone told us, they're like, you have to look on the back side of this building because there's his shoes. So anytime he decides to, go on a trip, his shoes are there so he can go walk out. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem like a very good protector, but if he can just leave whenever he wants. But the beauty of their complexes was kind of overwhelming, like how much this was a piece of their belief is like how much time and energy and artistic value they put into their buildings for this belief. So if you scooch onto the...
and that's a good point because like when I think of like ancient religions, I think of like Greece and Rome and like even, Christianity and Judaism. Like when you want, or like Egypt, when you want to go visit sites of, ancient religions, like you go see rubble. Right? It's like, oh, this was a place where a building was, and it was unearthed, however many hundreds of years ago, and it's from thousands of years ago. When you go to Japan, you're literally seeing temples that parts of them are original. Like the oldest wooden building is in Japan that they know of, and like it's this cool place in a place that we didn't go, but it's like the preservation of their history. Is so important to them and preserving their culture. Like just recently, they have a new prime minister, and one of the things that she said was, we want to preserve our culture and we want to keep Japan. Like they're not big on a lot of like immigration. And so as we were walking in there, here's some more things of like Lynn was speaking to.
These are like their Lucky Charm tokens. So the family that I knew in Hawaii, they would hang these over their doorposts, which is interesting when you think about they oftentimes like the blood of the lamb is over the doorpost. But so they put these over their doorposts. They hang them in their cars from their mirrors, and these are supposed to ward off evil spirits. They're supposed to give them good luck, good wealth, good health, and so basically any ailment that they could experience, they have some sort of token you can purchase to help ward that off.
Yeah, the little white square kind of under is like what it is and what it will like protect you from. And the smaller little white square is how much it costs. We didn't buy any. So as you were getting ready to walk into like the main hall of this temple, there's this massive like kettle of like incense. And so it's like you're cleaning yourself with the incense. There was this incense all over the place. So we walk in there and we see this. As we get closer, we see, this is like another, like on these temple grounds, they're massive. So there's multiple places that you can kind of go to worship. So this is one area, and then I think I have a zoom in place of another area where they're putting incense. Then as we walk in, you can kind of see in the background, this is like the main shrine area. But in the foreground right in front of Lynn, and you can see Savannah there and Ellie, there's like this little grate. And so you're tossing your money into that before you pray. And as you can see, there's a gentleman on the right-hand side, just kind of like his head, and you can see his hands are up because he's, praying. A couple weeks ago, David was talking about like the first commandment, and that was when we were gone. But I listened to it after we came back, and it made me laugh because he was like, "Don't make carved images of me." And he's like, "People don't do that anymore." And it was so crazy because I'm like, we're literally seeing this, and we're literally observing people actively participate in pagan worship, which is like, for me, was like one of the biggest culture shocks when I think of that. Because like, obviously, like when we speak of the first commandment in America, a lot of times we're saying, okay, we're not making carved images, but we have other idols, right? We have our job is our idol, and our family's our idol, or this is our idol. And while those are definitely valid points because we're elevating them to a point that is only allowed for God, it is so interesting to actually see people literally go, hey, we just made this, we're going to put this up here, and now we're going to worship that. Because it's things that you don't experience in American culture. So this was just like a very bizarre experience.
And the other interesting thing, when you toss the coins in, it makes very distinct, like clinking noises, like you can hear it. And then oftentimes the people will clap their hands and then pray because they have to wake the God up so they can hear it. So like the clinking, the clapping, everything is to wake their God up so that they'll maybe hear their prayers.
So another interesting thing, so there's just a kind of a better view of the grate there that you throw your money in. So this was a spot where, so after we left there, we kind of walked over to the side, and we're kind of, reading, what you're supposed to do, and there's this box. And you shake the box, and then you pull a stick out. And on the stick, there's a number. And the number corresponds to a drawer. As you can see, there's a lot of little drawers behind the kids. And when you pull that drawer out, then you pull out a fortune. And that's your fortune. And you take that with you, and you will, it says some wonderful thing. And so here's the girl.
Or some not so wonderful thing.
Yeah. So, as, anyone with more than one kid's of like, oh, so-and-so got to do it. I want to do it too. All right, we'll throw another little coin in there. And so I pulled it out, and I had a bad fortune. So.
We'll call him Bad Luck Bradshaw again.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've had to use that term.
So, but one of the things that's interesting, so it says if you get a bad fortune, fold it up and you tie it to these things, because I think I got a picture here. Only if you draw a bad fortune, please tie it to the rack, which is basically because if you take it with you, then your bad fortune comes true.
So if you get a bad one, you can get rid of it by just tying it up. So,
but you paid for it, so. So another interesting things that we saw, and these are at a couple different temples that we went to, was the washing. And so they'd have these, ladles, and you would go there and, rinse your hands off, and then you're clapped away the evil spirits, and then you're, clear to go into their, temples and stuff. So the kids had fun playing with that.
We definitely had to talk about, we know this isn't real, right? Like, we've been washed by the blood of Jesus. This is just fun water. You can pour it on your hands and participate in the culture. But, good teaching moments for the kids.
So this is where I was saying there was a place where, like, they had the battle, and, the Buddhist guy won. So this is, everyone calls it Shigi-san. How do you say that?
Chogoson Shiji.
That's why I say Shigi-san. So it's Mount Shigi, and so everyone just calls this temple. And so this was actually a really cool spot in Haeguri, which is near Osaka and kind of away from Tokyo, that we went. And some of the folks that we were talking to, they were like, this place is like a gem because the tourists don't really know about it. And it was just really cool. So that's a statue of Prince Shotoku, who was basically kind of a shogun and kind of like the first emperor-ish of a kind of a unified Japan. But he's the guy who won the battle against Shintoism and everything. And then a couple other pictures here. So a lot of the temples have different animals, and so this one was like the Temple of the Tiger. And so this is a huge like paper mache tiger. This temple location like goes back to like 700 and stuff, and so it's really kind of cool. And so you see the kids, like, you would walk through this like tiger mouth thing, and kind of I don't remember what the purpose was, but
I don't think we ever found the purpose of it. It was just kind of bizarre.
And then you see there's a large Buddha that's kind of up on the hill and kind of elevated out there. And so like I said, there's Buddhas all over the place. This was kind of when you get up to the main hall. There were so many, like, it's like going out in the the wilderness here, where you're like, which trail do I go? There were so many routes that you could go. I think we logged averaged about 12 to 13,000 steps a day, and we purposely didn't even explore all of the temples and every trail that you could go down to. I think the next slide is a video that I took at this place where one of the Buddhist monks is drumming and I think chanting. But it was just like I said, as someone with an American culture and context, it was just very strange to me, so I thought I would share that. That was a very common thing at a lot of the temples and stuff that we saw, where it's, I don't honestly understand all the context for some of the things that they were doing, but to see people actively engaging in some of these rituals and things to, for their religion was very strange. Here's just a couple other pictures. These tori gates, which are basically entrances,
They were often painted red because they believe red wards away evil spirits. But this one was made out of stone. But they're at the entrance of most temples.
Here's a picture of a lot of bad fortunes that people got. Those are all fortunes tied up.
I'll talk about this one. So on the left, you're going to see what looks like a lot of little babies. And this was a really unique shrine. I have actually never seen one of these before. And we asked the pastor of the church, what was this? And I showed him a picture. Because the babies, certain ones of the babies were dressed with hats, but always in red. And so I said, what is going on in here? And we saw people actively come. They would put offerings like water, food, in front of this. They would clap, pray, put money in. And the pastor said, this is actually almost like a graveyard type of shrine for babies that have been lost. So either miscarriages or little children that died or abortions. it was an interesting conversation around abortion, because in America it's very much celebrated by people who have abortions. It's usually shown as like, oh, women empowerment. In Japan, the women feel awful when they get abortions, and they're out of basically desperation of, they're a single mother, and that's very shameful in their society. Like, they'll be looked down on for their whole life. And so when they do have abortions, they believe that the baby spirits are angry because they never got a chance at life. And so the woman would come here and dress one of the babies to try to like calm the spirit of the baby so it wouldn't be so angry about its life being taken. So just that was probably one of my huge, like, what are we doing? I don't think we have a picture of it, but they said always at a baby shrine like this, they have some sort of pool of water. And people would throw money in the pool of water, and that was another like cleansing for, because the baby is in utero if it's aborted, and so the water is supposed to somehow be calming or cleansing to the baby spirit that's still there.
So the picture on the right is, we encountered this in a couple different places, but it's a darkness place, and it's basically a square room with a hallway around it, and the sign will say, like, walk through, keep your hand on the wall, and spirits, darkness, meditation is a very active part of Buddhism, and in a way that's honestly very frightening to me, because I look at it as like you were literally inviting demonic activity into your life. To like the goal of going into these places is to find darkness. We didn't have complete darkness because Adelaide had some light up shoes, which she had some fun with. But I'm just kind of walking through like, this is silly. But a lot of times this is one of those moments where as I'm walking through this, like, I could not help but just pray for Japan, for the people, to like just get rid of this darkness, because it's just consuming their life. Lynn had a little different experience.
I like dark spaces. So, and I was in the front, and so it's literally pitch black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. It's in like the basement of a temple. And then halfway through, when you turn, they'll have one like super dimly lit shrine that's supposed to like inspire you, like this god of whatever. But then you walk, another 100 paces in darkness. So it didn't make sense to me. But but definitely had kids clinging to me, and I walked with my hand like this just in case anything was trying to touch my face while I walked through. I don't think we did the full Buddhist experience, and the kids laughed most of the time. It was I felt a little bad. They were a little what's the right word? Reverent in there. So.
Here's a couple other pictures. This is over in Kyoto at
Kiyomizu-dera.
That's the one. So I looked this up. This is a really cool spot. Honestly, the picture on the left, if we were to zoom into it, Lynn and I are there, so we sent Savannah around to take a picture of us. But this is like this temple location was founded in the 700s, and they've had like basically this great hall in the clouds there. The current version, that wooden building was actually rebuilt in the 1600s. But it's just a really cool location. It's just kind of, it's one of those places where, you start walking toward it, and it's literally 2 miles of commerce before you get to the temple location. And then they had another darkness thing, and they had, all these different temple ground areas that we could kind of go to and see. And it was just, a really interesting location. And so I thought we'd share that with you. This is just another, we'll talk more about Nara in a little bit, but this is a location that we went to. So Nara, Japan is kind of like the birthplace of Japanese civilization, is what they believe. So like this is where the oldest building is. We didn't go to it, but like this temple complex is hundreds, over 1,000 years old. And there's deer everywhere, which is kind of cool. We got some more pictures of that we'll talk about a little bit.
They actually, so you know how all the temples have animals? Well, this whole town, Nara, is known for their bowing deer, which is just interesting. Bowing is a very, normal. Everyone bows. It's just out of politeness. I kept waving, when we'd cross the street, and everyone's looking at me. And then I finally learned you're supposed to bow, not wave. So, but lots of deer at the temple grounds, and you can buy crackers and feed them. And if you bow to them, they'll bow their heads back too, which was funny. But they walk all around the temple grounds. They wash the ground constantly around there with hoses. So that was kind of funny.
So this temple is called Todaiji, and there's the Grand Buddha, which is one of the largest bronze Buddhas in the world. I think it might be the largest bronze. Here's a couple of pictures of just some additional guards that they have. These are called rikishis, and there was one that did prosperity and wealth, and there was another one that focused on wisdom. So you kind of go into the temple, and then next to it they have these other statues. This was super interesting to me. As we came out, there was just kind of this thing on the side, and I was like, oh, what is that? And I go over, and there's a little sign there, and what it basically says is, this is a disciple of Buddha, and it's commonly believed that in Japan, if you have an ailment, you can go touch that part of this statue and then touch that same part on your body, and it will heal you. The interesting thing that really stood out to me was Pindola, which this is a statue of, says to have excelled in the mastery of occult powers, which I was just again, it was just kind of on the side, and I was just oh, what is that? Let me go take a picture. And I read that, and I was like, holy cow, again, just the full embracement of darkness and evil, and it's just part of the culture, which is just very, very scary to me, really. Here's a couple other things that Lynn can explain.
This is, so this was in the town of Kyoto. Kyoto is a very old part of Japan. They're also known for having some of the most amount of city shrines. And so you walk through on every street, there's a shrine set up. All hours of the day you can go in and throw your money in and do your prayers. So that's what Kyoto is known for.
And then this is at a place called Fushimi Inari, which was, I think, one of the only just Shinto places that we went. But, it's the place of 1,000 torii gates, which there's so many of them, and it's just line the whole path all over the hillside. But their guardian there is a fox. And again, you can see the torii gate is in red, and the scarf around the fox's neck is also in red to ward off evil spirits. So these are the things that we experienced from just seeing their culture, which was one of the things that we really wanted to understand going there, because while we've been there, I've never gone with the sole intent of trying to better understand kind of what does the battleground look like for in the religious space. So the two primary mission organizations that we were able to get in contact with, they actually responded, and we were able to set up times to meet with them. There was Send International and then Impact Japan. And so Send International was all in the greater Tokyo area, which the greater Tokyo area is the largest metropolitan in the world. There's 40 plus million people in this greater area. It's huge. And so they have people all over kind of that area. Some of the things that they were telling us about were they do a lot of parachurch ministries. So they will do things like have a youth ministry or a young adult ministry. They'll do homeless ministries. They have a lot of community outreach stuff with artists. They do they have basically Camp Elkanah type thing that they have. And then they're one of their organization as part of founded a Christian school, which is called the Christian Academy of Japan. And now they're still affiliated with them. And a lot of teachers that work at that school are actually there through mission organizations to teach. And then the other one was Impact Japan, which was over more toward Osaka and Higuri Nara area, which is on the western side of the main island. And so we got to visit the Kansai Christian School and Nara New Life Church. So we have some pictures and stuff that will kind of explain a little bit more of who we spoke to and kind of what they're doing. The one big interesting thing was, when I kind of think of missions outside of we're going to go serve for a week to do, something great for these people, I think of church planting. There's a seminary trained guy and his wife, and they're just out somewhere and they're planting churches and they're building these churches up. It was a real paradigm shift for me to see that that's kind of what they would consider kind of like the old model. Is Send is not really doing that anymore. They have done that, historically, but what they're doing now is they're finding these established Japanese churches and then just pouring into them in any way that they can. Whether it's youth ministry, helping them with music, helping them with theology, helping them people get trained to go to seminary or whatever it may be. So it's really cool to see how they're partnering with existing churches that are over there. So this was the church that we went to. We flew out basically Friday morning. It's an 11-hour flight. Technically, by the calendar hours, it's 35 hours. So we land late Saturday night, basically get to our place to sleep, figure out where we got to go, what train we have to catch to go to church tomorrow. So we went to this church called Tokyo Life Church. Tokyo Life Church was, it's an average sized church in Japan is probably 20 to 30 people. That's we're doing all right. This church does a bilingual service. So the gentleman on the stage is one of the pastors, and so he will, preach, and he'll kind of say a few sentences, and then the lady to his left will then translate that into Japanese, which, the few of us who have had the random opportunity to preach here know that that's hard enough, and trying to figure out transitions and all of those kinds of things. I couldn't imagine I'm having to stop my flow every 2 sentences for that. And there's pros and cons of kind of doing both. It was really interesting. They had some songs that were mixed of Japanese and English, and then they had the English version words of the Japanese. What's it called?
Romanji.
Yeah, and so it's basically the phonetically way how to pronounce Japanese words. And so they're kind of singing songs in both ways, which was pretty cool. So. So this was just a quick video that I took during kind of the closing worship. It was really cool just to interact with a lot of folks at the church. There's a lot of teachers at the school. There's Americans, Canadians, Indonesians, Koreans. Very international church that are all there in some capacity as missionaries. And so this is one of their churches that we were able to visit. And then after that, it was just cool how it worked out. Once a month, they do a homeless ministry where they pack these bento boxes, which is like a lunch, and then they pass them out. And so we just happened to be there on the Sunday that they were doing that, so we got to go participate. And you can see Adelaide handing out some water, and Savannah's got the hand sanitizer for folks. And they usually hand out about 65 lunches to people. And so we go out there and they have the little band playing on the side, just some worship music, and then people are just handing out everything. So it's just really cool just to kind of see that. Which after speaking to another missionary in another town, he was like, wow, that's really cool that they do that and that they're able to be successful with it, because part of the Japanese culture and very like shame-based honor system of their culture is they don't really like benefits. They don't like free stuff. So they've looked at trying to do things of like, hey, can we like get a food truck and like offer this as a free thing? And it's like, they actually are looking at what event can we plan that will bring people there that they will pay for, and then the food's just part of it. So it's, you tell me there's a free steak dinner, I'm going to be there, But, just like I said, the Japanese culture is very, very hard to get them to accept kind of like a no strings attached freebie. So this is just a picture of a few of the people that we were able to meet with. So the picture on the bottom left is a couple that have been in Japan for several years now. They actually met in Japan separately as missionaries, and are doing a young adult ministry. And so there we met with them. They're the ones who took us to church. Afterwards, we went out for lunch, and were able to just kind of pick their brains on how they do things, how they feel about their organization, which every person we talked to from Send was like, this is awesome. So we're able to do that. The picture on the top right was the next, I think the next night. We're able to meet with a pastor who has been in Japan for 38 years. He's 2 years away from retiring. He said he met his wife 30 years ago when he was on like his furlough back to the States, and was basically like, hey, if we want to get married, like we're moving back to Japan. So she's been there for 30 years, and there was another girl who'd been there for about a year or so. She's a new missionary out there, and she was awesome, and was able to kind of take the kids and watch them and interact with them while we were able to talk with Jim and Angie. And then we were able to visit Christian Academy of Japan. They were off that week, but it was just kind of cool to see their campus. They're a little bit bigger than like Enterprise. I think they're 450 students total.
But they serve a lot of, they serve basically half local Japanese kids and then half missionary family kids. And they're international schools, so they definitely follow American curriculum and stuff. But interesting to see a lot of the missionaries who go work at schools like this if they're teachers. And then the husband does some sort of other mission, something, church planting or other, youth ministry type of thing.
Yeah, and then after that, we were able to go to the Send International building, and then after that, we met with the director of the organization, who, for the first 10 years in Japan, they were up near
Tokugawa.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think what the location was where there was the nuclear disaster a few years back, but kind of up in that area. And so just we were telling them how rural Wallowa County is, and they're like, yeah, we've been in that kind of rural Japan. So that was just really interesting. It was really cool, like I said, just to kind of meet with all these people, to kind of see what they're doing, to see how they've kind of shifted their approaches to mission work over there. A lot of folks said that they will send their kids basically first grade through sixth grade to the Japanese public schools to get language and kind of embraced in the culture, but then they will then send them to a school like the Christian Academy of Japan for middle school and high school. Because the greater Tokyo area is so large, people were saying that kids are regularly riding a train 45 minutes to school.
By themselves.
Yes.
Without kindergartners. And it's that safe and clean of a society that little kids ride trains by themselves, which is bizarre to me. But
yeah, think about sending your kid on the Max or the New York subway system by themselves, and then it's there's just tons of kids that we see on the trains. A couple other things that we saw is this was kind of all the people that they had out in Japan currently working with Send. And then there's another cool picture of these are all the people that are in the process of, they've gone through the whatever recruitment processes to become missionaries in Japan, and now they're in fundraising status. So these are all people that are just waiting to build up whatever financial support that they need in order to get to Japan. So then we were able to go, like I said, to visit with people with Impact Japan. So this is Kansai Christian School, which is, instead of like 30 kids per class, it's like 30 kids. So much smaller, but like I said, a lot of people send their kids to public schools when they're younger. So like the primary grades were like 2 to 3 students. Middle school grades were like 6 to 7, depending on it. And so, the kids got to go there. They had like chapel that day, and so we got to participate in that, which is really cool. And then we went to Not a New Life Church, which, like, there's a pastor who's been in Japan for 40 years, who married a Japanese woman, who had 3 children, who all then married Americans from Minnesota, and all those kids, all those families are now in Japan, and the son and the 2 sons-in-law all work at the school, and the son is also a pastor. It's confusing.
It's a family mission, but really cool to see the impact that they have on that area.
The principal at the school said, some people might call it nepotism. We call it accountability. So it was kind of cool. And then, so this church, they did a English service and then a Japanese service. And so I was talking with that pastor about like kind of the pros and cons of it, and he was just saying like, if you're bilingual, then you're kind of hearing little bits twice, and it can be hard. And then, it just takes a long time to fully develop your Japanese. So once you kind of get to that point where you can fully preach, just fully preach in that language. So this is a picture of the English service, and then I think I have a video of the Japanese service, which you can kind of just look how it shrinks. I think there's about 5 people in there for the Japanese-only service. So, you kind of see how it shrinks a little bit, but and I think there's probably about all but 5 people were new to this service. The other folks were like part of the mission or helping in some way. I have a couple other pictures of some cool things that they're doing out there. It didn't work out just the days that we were going to be there, but they're in the middle of this Impact Japan training course right now, and where they basically. He was like, hey, if you're going to be here, you can come, audit a class, basically. And they do everything from language training to history of Japan, history of religions in Japan. The primary pastor here, John Dugan, he's been there for 40 years, and he actually has a very strong background in cults, which Japan is very prominent for having cults. There was a sarin gas bombing of the Tokyo subway system by basically a cult/terrorist organization in the 90s that I used to look at from what I used to do in my old jobs. But he was like, yeah, this was a cult. These are things that they're very prone to follow into cults.
And so one of his specialties is he would rescue people out of cults and bring them, teach them about the Lord. So.
And so I think I know Lynn had some conversations that I didn't have of just kind of what life was like in Japan as, what these missionaries are experiencing.
Definitely areas that we can be praying for them. A lot of the missionaries, they said Japan is a very lonely society with all the people everywhere. It's shocking how many suicides there are. How much pressure there is for young people, which is why a lot of the parents try to get them out of the public school and into these Christian international schools, because it's the amount of pressure. A lot of kids end up committing suicide, so they have one of the highest suicide rates. And also, they said because the culture is lonely, missionaries are also very lonely. So the people that are there, the wives are like, you really have your community of missionaries, that you have to lean into and stuff. But something I think our church could be really good at praying for is community for those missionaries and the Japanese people to come to the church and receive belonging there.
Yeah, it's very odd to invite people over for dinner. the missionaries will do that with locals, but the Japanese people, like, you don't host people in your home. And part of it's because their homes are very small, but part of it's just because they're just kind of socially distant in some ways. And so, yeah, it was just very interesting kind of learning about some of those things and all of that. And, one of the comments that one of the pastors told us was, there's this word in Japanese that basically means twisted. And the reason that they pull their kids from public schools in middle school is because it becomes twisted, which is basically like, that's when the societal pressures really start hitting you, and like bullying and a lot of just kind of like negative energy is there. And, like Lynn was saying about suicide, like kids basically, like, they'll apply for university once. If they don't get in, they apply for their second time. If they don't make it, a lot of those kids are, instead of being shamed into then becoming like working class, like there's literally a place in Japan called the Hanging Forest because so many people go there. Youth suicide is outrageous there. And so a lot of these kids are, and so there's a moment in time when kids are kind of like leaving college to before they start being part of like the Japanese economy, where there's like, it's like the pressure's off for a moment, and there's a lot of success rate in bringing people to Christ during that time frame. But from a like overall context standpoint, one of the pastors told us, if you're going to be a missionary in Japan, you have to be okay with being here for 20 years and maybe seeing one person come to Christ. Which he's like, so, when people are thinking about that, like, is that worth it to you? Which, obviously one person should be worth it. But so here's a couple other just pictures of places that we went. This is the Osaka Castle. There was like the World Expo, like the World Fair in Osaka. We missed it by like 2 days, but they still had some stuff out there. And then, so here's some deer. Sydney was in heaven while we were doing this. I think we had to keep going back and finding her. They're like a...
I was going to say, in true Wallowa County fashion, Zach, because the deer were so willing, who went up, and because you can pet them and all this stuff, and he was showing Savannah, so when we go hunting back home, right here, and he's like rubbing the deer, I was like, this is so sadistic. I don't know what to tell you.
I looked up hunting laws. It's very hard to hunt there, so... But the deer there are like a mix. They remind me of like a mini elk or like a mini red stag. Their antlers are very elk-shaped. They actually would like cut them off and make them like round them off so they wouldn't like gore anybody. But they're super friendly. They bugle. Like I had some videos of them like with like a little bugle, which is kind of funny. And so it was just fun seeing that out there. And this is the largest crosswalk in the world. Millions of people go across this crosswalk every day.
It's called Shibuya Crossing.
Yeah, and it's right near it is the Hachiko statue. So if you've seen the life story of Richard Gere in that movie, it's based on a true story. But yeah, it's just kind of a cool place to see. So it's kind of like it's like an Abbey Road thing. If you're there, you got to take a picture when and then not get hit by a car. And then. This, kind of winds down. This wasn't the last night there, but this was after a long night of, I got to tell you, take your kids on an 11-hour flight, get them up in crazy hours. You're waking up at 2 a.m. and you're like, is it morning yet? Or like, what's going on here? But the kids were troopers, and this was usually what the night looked like as we were winding down on a train. And I slept great on the train, or on the plane though, so. So what's next? As we're winding down this morning, we just have a couple more things we'll talk about. And it's just looking at kind of some next steps. So this was the verse that really, or the passage that really came to our minds as we were thinking about what missions in Japan is experiencing. So Matthew 9:35 through 38. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Less than 1% of the population of a very populous country, a very first world nation, have come to the Lord. And while there are a lot of missionaries over there actively working, I think as we and as our family has experienced, my goal in a lot of this is like, I want our passion for Japan to become, our passion for Japan. I think some things that we can look at as individuals and as a church to look at are to just pray about, your future role in Japan with missions, whether that be, just being a prayer warrior, whether that's helping these organizations financially. Like I said, there's that group of send missionaries that are building support. And so they're just working on trying to come up with either individuals or churches that are willing to support them financially. And then I think as a church, things that we can look at is just pray about our future as a church with our current and future missionaries. We support Pendleton Hope Venture, the Drinkall family, and maybe potentially, Japan-focused missions. So, as we continue to kind of look at what this looks like, I think, in conversations that I've had with David, I think there's the beginnings of things, in the works of, our church kind of maybe supporting missionaries or missions in Japan. And, I think that becomes not just hey, we're sending, a few $1,000s to somebody every year. It's, actively engaging in supporting some of these missionaries that are there. So, as we, wind down our message this morning, I think we kind of went a little longer than we were thinking about. But let's go ahead and just pray, and the band's going to come on up, and we'll send you on your way. Father God, we love you and we thank you for giving our family a safe and prosperous trip in Japan, being able to meet so many of your people that are working so hard there. And I thank you for Summit Church and the support that they gave us in going. And I just pray for whatever your will is in the future for missions in Japan. We love you and ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.